Welcome back to another Bali COVID-19 update. This is January 23rd, 2022. My name is Bruce, and I'm kind of silly today because I just finished a cooking video and I ate a lot of black rice pudding and I'm full and ready for a nap. Two main stories today. I saw G20 cancellations in Bali and they were moved to Jakarta, and a segment on domestic tourism not being enough to revive Bali's local economy. And I'm switching the order again today. I'm going back to having numbers first, then the two main stories, and then everything else after that. Why? No reason. I just feel like changing things around. We've had 2 days in a row here in Singaraja with no rain. I'm in a great mood. Today is beautiful, and I am ready to do some road trips around the island. I'll talk about that at the very end. First, let's take a look at the numbers, which not unexpected, but not great either. The 7-day average in Bali for new positive cases is 28. Yes, 28. We're up to 28. And 7-day average for deaths, 0.3. So, as I said last time, numbers are going up, new cases, but the death count is staying low. Nationally, we are up to 3,205 cases, the highest since September, and only 5 deaths. Well, not only for the families of the people who died, but in terms of numbers, it's positive. And what about testing? Total number of individuals tested, 194,500, 1.65% positive rate, and 7-day average positivity rate is 0.96, so it's going up too. And what about testing in Bali? Bali tested over the last 7 days, 42,890 individuals with a 7-day positivity rate of 0.35. Vaccination numbers, first dose, 3,892,323, 86.1% of the population. Second dose, 3,339,678, 73.9% of the population. And additional doses yesterday in Bali, 26,909. Buleleng is putting out a schedule every day of where you can get vaccinated. So if you're up in Buleleng and you have not been vaccinated, or you need to get a second or a third shot, you can take a look. And that is on social media and easy to access. And what about new cases yesterday in Bali? New cases, 44. And recorded COVID-19 deaths, 0. Okay, so the 0 is great, the 44, no. Active cases up to 245. So those numbers are not looking great, but as I said, they're not unexpected. People were expecting, everybody was expecting, a spike after the holiday period when people were traveling, even though they were told not to. Well, if the epidemiologists are right, our numbers are still gonna go up, because this is, we've got one more week, more or less, of January, and this is supposed to go on until mid to late February, so we could see these numbers continue to go way up. So let's get on to the main story about the G20. And here is some bad news on Bali and G20, right? The government and a lot of people in the Bali tourism industry have really been hoping that G20 is going to bring a big economic boost to the island. Well, here's the first bit of bad news, and there's a couple of stories about this. Activities on G20 finance track presidency in Bali canceled. This is the explanation from the deputy governor of Bali. So in a letter numbered S3 G20.33/2020, dated January 19th, 2022, which was signed by the Secretary of the Implementation Committee for the G20 Logistics Sector meeting, Rudy Ramadi. Cancellation was due to the increasing spread of the new variant COVID-19, mainly Omicron, which is getting higher at both the local, national, and international levels. Additionally, based on survey results, it seems that many of delegates are going to follow a hybrid route for their respective countries. And so some of them will be coming and some of them will be attending virtually. Okay, this was not planned on. Omicron was not planned on, but this is January, and if the surge happens within the next 3 weeks and nothing else happens, well, we'll see how things go. So based on these two things, the central government has decided to move the meeting location to Jakarta. According to the letter, with regard to the above matters, the entire agenda for the second FCBD and first FMCBG, these are the meetings, the activities in Bali, and the entire series of activities have been canceled. And the deputy governor said that he only received this information from the social media. He said, I read on social media that a letter also appeared there, that it was not the G20 that was canceled, but an event that should have been held in February, which is also planned to be an event in Bali. Not all events in Bali, some are in Jakarta, there's one in Bandung. The event that has entered the slot in Bali was brought to Jakarta. That's the reason, because of Omicron, he said. So the deputy governor found out about this on social media. So because of the hybrid manner that many delegates are choosing and the virtual aspect of parts of these meetings, it has been moved to Jakarta to facilitate its implementation. I'm not sure why that is, but check out the next segment to see what the government says. Domestic travelers, not enough to revive Bali tourism. Okay, so we know that the economy has been given a boost by domestic travelers, but not a big enough boost. Bali's tourism sector has been relying on the domestic tourism since the start of the pandemic, since we have no foreign tourists other than people coming in on the B211. The number of trips to Bali by domestic travelers rose by 19.81% to 8.61 million in 2020, according to BPS, the Statistics Indonesia. And over the same period, foreign arrivals at Igusti Ngurah Rai International Airport plunged by 83% to 1.05 million. And the increase in domestic arrivals can be attributed largely to people moving to Bali temporarily while office occupancy in Jakarta and elsewhere was reduced to stem the pandemic. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, I haven't heard that is a reason. You remember the work from Bali? That was a long time ago, and I didn't think it had that much of an impact. According to Maulana Yusran, Secretary General of the Indonesian Hotel and Restaurant Association, businesses in some regions, such as Bali and Bintan in the Riau Islands, cannot replace foreign tourists with domestic travelers as a source of income. And we know that hotels and homestays are empty on the island. You can, if you watch any of the videos that I watch, the monkeys and Bobo and others wandering around doing their daily videos, you see that we do have domestic tourists here, and some restaurants have opened up and some hotels are running. But still a lot of empty, closed up businesses. And here in Lovina as well, and some hotels for sale, homestays for sale. So we still have a long way to go before the tourism industry gets going, which is why Bali needs to diversify its economy, because this is not the only time this is going to happen. We've had 2 terrorist attacks, volcanoes, the pandemic. Bali has to have an economy that can survive strongly without dependence on tourism. And the government keeps saying that, but, well, they haven't done much about it. Star-related and other hotels in the province are struggling to maintain occupancy levels, as foreign guests usually count to 57% of the total, according to PBS data. This is an unusually high proportion compared to other parts of the country. In November 2021, the occupancy rate of star-rated hotels in Bali was 20.67%, the lowest in the country. The second lowest occupancy rate was in Riau Islands at 31.54%. So, not good, still a long way from when it was below 10%, but 20% is, well, not enough. As one of my daughters, who graduated with a degree of tourism, can't find a job in hotels because, well, there ain't no job. Maulana added that he was expecting meetings, incentives, conferencing, exhibitions to provide the biggest push for the industry's recovery, noting that spending by people traveling for such purposes was usually more robust. Sure, when you're on business, wow, spend, spend, spend. I used to do that all the time when I was going out to international conferences. Domestic travelers coming to Bali for MICE, that's the meetings, conferences, exhibitions, spent an average of 5.4 million rupiah per trip, and that is 29.4% higher than the average spending for those traveling for marine tourism. And in March, we have the MotoGP in Lombok, And Tourism and Creative Economy Minister Pak Sandiaga Uno said that the event is expected to draw about 100,000 visitors from Indonesia and abroad. Wow. Indonesia will also host the Group of 20 Summit at the end of the year in Bali, and there is a story coming up on that in just a minute, and that is not good news, as well as a series of events leading up to the summit. Meanwhile, nationwide, the number of trips by domestic travelers decreased in 2020 by 28.19%. In 2020, domestic travelers spent an average of 1.55 million rupees per trip. Wow. I wish I could do that on a trip. That's nothing. A fraction of the 30 million spent by foreign tourists on their average, according to BPS. Partly this is explained by the time that foreign tourists spend here, being here an average of 8 days, while domestic tourists just 2 days. So the weekenders. The executive director of the Center for Reform on Economics said that purchasing power is the main challenge to reviving tourism with domestic travelers. They just don't have the money. Okay, and more on G20. Head of BTB responds to events finance track G20 move to Jakarta. Agung, we shouldn't be too sensitive. Okay, the short take on this segment, don't get upset. So Agung Partha Adnyana, the chair of the Bali Tourism Board, BTB, expressed his opinions recently on the moving of the meeting from Bali to Jakarta. He said it's necessary to look at the situation and the conditions because the pandemic, things change quickly, and so everybody has to be ready to adapt. He said, we don't have to be too sensitive. According to him, if some G20 events are brought to Jakarta, it does not mean that other events will also fail to take place in Bali. Indeed, he said, meetings will be held throughout Indonesia, not only in Bali. And he said in response to Puspa Negara's statement about how disappointed he was with the decision to move the events to Jakarta, he said, we have to know the depth first, the possibility that there won't be a lot of attendance because of Omicron. Maybe that's just how it is. And he hopes that the implementation of the G20 in Bali can serve as a destination promotion event and show that after 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic, Bali is still okay to visit. There was an article that I'll see if I can find, but it was, I think, for TripAdvisor survey, Bali is listed as number 4 most popular tourist destination for 2022. That's some good news for us. And what has the governor got to say about all this? According to him, Pak Jokowi said that Bali will remain the main venue for the series of G20 meetings, which began in December 2021. In total, there are going to be around 345 meetings at the engagement group, working group, deputy, and central bank minister governor levels, with the culmination of which will be attended by heads of state at the 2022 summit in Bali. So currently, it's only been decided to move 2 meetings from Bali to Java. And this is in line with the preference of G20 delegates who preferred Jakarta due to consideration of the high Jakarta-Bali transit risk in line with increasing exposure to Omicron. So why can't they just fly directly into Bali and bypass that Java-Bali risk? I don't know, but that is the explanation. And the governor concluded that all parties need not be excited at the decision taken by the Indonesian Ministry of Finance, that it is for the common good, taking into account various management and technical aspects, as well as convenience for the participants. And so this must be understood wisely by all parties. And some good news for Omicron patients. Well, if you're an Indonesian citizen, it's not clear if this is going to apply to foreigners at this time. Omicron patients allowed to self-isolate for 10 to 13 days. So Omicron patients, both showing symptoms and mild symptoms, are allowed to self-isolate as long as they meet clinical and residential requirements regulated by the Health Ministry Circular Number HK0201 Menkes 18/2022 concerning prevention and control of the Omicron variant. So the way this works out is for confirmed asymptomatic cases of COVID-19, isolation is carried out for a minimum of 10 days since the specimen for diagnosis confirmation is taken. And patients showing symptoms must undergo 10 days of isolation since the symptoms appear, and an additional 3 days free of symptoms of fever and respiratory issues. What are the requirements for being able to isolate at home? You have to be under 45 years of age, have no comorbidities, be able to access telemedicine or other health services, and being committed to staying isolated before being allowed out. Oh, that's always an issue, being committed to staying isolated. Additionally, in the residential requirements and other supporting equipment, patients can stay in a separate room, so they should stay in a separate room. They should have their own bathroom. If possible, they should even have their own floor of the residential facility they're staying in, and they should have a oximeter available. If patients do not meet these requirements, they will be isolated in a centralized isolation facility determined by the government. So that's good news for Indonesian citizens, well, young Indonesian citizens. No good news yet for foreigners coming in here, and I would be cautious about this. And there's some rumors floating around about Bali being opened up for quarantine. Those are just rumors. There is nothing, not even in the press that I've seen. The people that have posted this here, when they're asked to show a link, they don't show one. So I'm thinking these are rumor mongers. So if you hear this, unless you see a link, yeah, don't believe it. If you do see a link, please post it here. And I'm outside today. It did not rain yesterday, a whole day without rain. Amazing. So I've talked about the MotoGP coming up in March, and well, it's become controversial. And so there are 3 segments on that here. Travel bubble policy, spot on, beneficial, on time, Sandiaga Uno. And so the Tourism and Creative Economy Minister, Pak Sandiaga Uno, said that the travel bubble policy for foreign tourists during COVID-19 pandemic was spot on and would serve as a momentum for national economic recovery. The travel bubble policy is the opening of international border zones that allow citizens to travel within determined areas. And Pak Sandiaga Uno said that the policy was aimed at the G20 summit delegates and the racers, officials, and crews of MotoGP in Mandalika, and that it would be extended for Batam in Riau Islands as well. There is the bubble travel policy. Now, what is the bubble travel policy? I did a lot of looking to find out exactly how this is going to play out now. Well, I haven't been really lucky in finding much. There's some old stories that go back to June, but even that, they're not really specific. But hang on, we'll take a look and see more of what's coming up here in the next segment. And here's another segment. Sandiaga Uno, Mandalika MotoGP to continue under travel bubble scheme. So Pak Uno said that the MotoGP is going to continue in Lombok and that it would be under the travel bubble scheme, which applies to all parties, including crews, racers, and officials. And according to Pak Uno, there's going to be no special treatment for everybody involved in this. It said everyone from coming abroad will follow the travel bubble scheme. And according to this article, the travel bubble program had been tested in preparation for the G20 event in Bali and Jakarta in December last year, and was tested for the World Superbike 2021. During that event, racers and crews were placed in private location where they did not directly interact with other parties. Okay, so I guess that's the travel bubble scheme. And according to Pak Uno, the health protocols are going to be even stricter in order to prevent a spread of the Omicron variant. Pak Uno added that according to Pak Jokowi, everyone will hold hands together and prepare and make sure that the MotoGP event is a sign for the world that we are ready for upcoming international events such as the G20 and other international conferences. Okay, I can see everybody holding hands here. Well, in the next segment, some people from the MotoGP are not holding hands. Pak Uno says that the COVID-19 control in Indonesia has been admitted to be one of the best practices in the world. And he said, we need to convey that there is a travel bubble policy which is 1 times 24 hours for all crews, racers, and officials. And they will follow this scheme, starting with their arrival at the airport until they arrive at the hotel after they PCR tested, which is based on health ministry regulations. So, okay, according to this, they come in, they get tested for the PCR at the hotel, then they go to the hotel and they're quarantined for 24 hours. Based on what I could pick up from before, then they're free to travel around just the certain area that they're in. So in this case, it would be, I guess, Lombok. If anybody's got any clarification on this, boy, I would sure appreciate a comment below. Please make sure that you cite sources. And the tourism minister is optimistic that MotoGP will contribute significantly to economic recovery for about 3 to 4 times higher than during the World Superbike event. And they're expecting apparently up to 100,000 local and international viewers. And finally, one more segment on the controversy about the MotoGP. Indonesia responds to MotoGP bosses stand against quarantine. So Pak Sandiaga Uno said in a press conference that it's clear that Indonesia's policy will apply to every international visitor and does not exempt MotoGP entourage of officials, crews, and racers. Getting tough, he said, I would like to firmly convey here that Indonesia is a lawful country, one that has implemented COVID-19 control measures that adhere to what is deemed best. And this comes as a direct response to a threat of cancellation issued by Dorna Sport boss Carmelo, who says he can cancel MotoGP races in a country if quarantine is mandatory, which it is here. And Expelata was responding to the Djokovic drama at the Australian Open. And Pak Uno said that Indonesia has met all of its obligations related to the MotoGP contract and that threatening to cancel the event due to quarantine procedures will not be accepted. Okay, getting some hardball here. Pak Uno said that the quarantine procedure comes under a travel bubble which will specifically subject the MotoGP entourage to where they can continue to prepare for racing even though they are in a quarantine period. And this travel bubble scheme will also be applied to G20 delegates. Pak Uno called for people to remain optimistic about the MotoGP event. We're getting a lot of optimism and expects it to be held as planned. We'll have to see how this develops. This is some money here, so this is going to be important. If this gets canceled, boy, it's going to be an issue. And more on the sexual violence bill. I'm going to keep doing updates on this, and well, I may be doing them for a long time. House expects July passage as lawmakers endorse sexual violence bill. And the president said immediately, he wanted it immediately done, so now we're looking at July. So the House of Representatives has set July for the passage of the long-delayed sexual violence bill to ensure that it's deliberated properly after a clear majority of lawmaker factions have agreed on it. And of course, there is one lawmaker faction who is not agreeing on it, and some other legislators as well. There is a continuing push to pass this because of highly publicized strings of sexual violence that have happened around the country over the last year. And this is despite the strong and vocal opposition of Islam-based political parties, which fear that the law will be pro-adultery and support the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community, and, well, encourage premarital sex. But House lawmakers took the first big step by agreeing to find common ground. Okay, I thought they had already done this, and setting the stage for earnest talks with the government on how to provide legal protection to victims of sexual violence. This week, 8 of 9 political party factions voted to endorse the bill, the only one being PKS, Prosperous Justice Party, who, well, you know why they voted against it. According to Luluk Nur Hamida, a House lawmaker representing the National Awakening Party, she said that the decision to approve the bill brings the country one step closer to providing legal protection of victims of sexual violence and acknowledging that it is a crime and punishable by law. She said it's a bit difficult to pass the bill in one sitting period because we don't want it just to be pushed through while neglecting its quality. It might be done in 2 sessions around July. And there is a long bureaucratic process that this is going to have to go through before it becomes a law. And I'm going to save you the kind of boring discussion on that. But if you're interested, check the link below and you can see the article. Maidina Ramawati, a researcher at the Institute of Criminal Justice Reform, told the Post that the House endorsement was an important first step forward. And according to Nur Hassana of the Forum Penggara Layanan, FPL, a non-governmental organization that provides advocacy for victims of sexual violence across the country, she said that the lawmaking process must include the aspirations of the many stakeholders among the public, ranging from the survivors, families, and victims. She concluded, "We call on the public to continue monitoring the process until it is concluded." That means keep the pressure on. What is happening in Thailand, and especially with masks? Phuket vows tough action on unmasked tourists. So the local authorities have decided to take legal action against tourists who refuse to wear face masks because they say this behavior is rampant and hampers their effects at disease control on the island. The governor of Phuket said he's already talked to 22 councils of countries, asking them to inform their citizens of the requirement to wear masks when they're outside in Phuket. He said violators will be arrested and prosecuted, and they've handed this over to the public health office to create files on the offenders. The Phuket governor said that they are forming a task force that will be in charge of enforcing the mask mandate in Phuket. And they will be inspecting people at popular locations, including Soi Bangla and Patong areas. The governor issued an order on January 7th saying that people have to wear a mask except when they are eating, drinking, or exercising. And violations of this order have a penalty of up to 20,000 bahts under the Communicable Disease Act, and a fine of up to 40,000 bahts and or a jail term of up to 2 years. Under the executive decree on public administration and emergency situations imposed to control COVID-19. Wow, they are getting serious there. And the local immigration officer did not say to what extent actual punishments will be taken in terms of immigration. That is, will people be deported? Not yet to be determined. So for my friends on their way to Phuket, don't forget to wear your mask. More on Thailand. As I talked about in the last video, the test and go scheme is going to be restored, it looks like, and it is being fine-tuned now. So according to the Secretary General of the National Security Council, the test and go rules will need to be tightened. The CCSA, which I've talked about a lot before, the Center for COVID-19 Situation Administration, is looking at ways to monitor the health of arrivals during the first 7 days of entry. And it appears that the tightening of the program, arrivals will undergo 2 PCR tests, one when they arrive and a second on the 5th or 6th day. Before the program was suspended earlier this month, the overseas visitors only had to spend 1 night at a hotel. If their COVID-19 test was negative, they were free to leave their accommodation and enjoy their holidays. However, because of the increase in COVID-19 cases, they're going to revise this program, but they also noted that cases seem to be stabilizing right now. And the center is considering adjusting areas with varying degrees of COVID-19 prevalence and easing some restrictions to allow for greater mobility. And well, that's good, okay, to look at situations and make rules up based on what's happening in local situations. And the PM, the Prime Minister of Thailand, said that measures need to be modified where necessary to help revive the economy. Thailand is really pushing this to get tourism rolling again there, despite the rise in cases, something that Indonesia may want to look at. And on Wednesday also, and this is very important if you're going to Thailand as well, the Public Health Ministry suggested that overseas visitors take out comprehensive health insurance that covers all COVID-19 treatments. According to the Permanent Health Secretary, the visitors must ensure that they're fully covered for all types of COVID-19 treatment. Why? Because the government's been paying for foreigners. Partial insurance coverage leaves the government to pick up the rest of the bill. So far, 100 million baht of state funds have been dispersed for foreigners who have not had enough money to pay for their treatment. And he said, we will no longer subsidize. The visitors must buy insurance that covers all treatments or purchase additional health insurance when they arrive here. The measure will take effect when Test and Go is reintroduced. Don't forget the mask and the health insurance, and it's got to cover COVID-19. If anybody knows any kind of health insurance, travel health insurance that covers COVID-19 treatments, because you're going to need them here too, please leave a comment below. And what's happening in Bali? A lot of news in Bali today. Starting tomorrow, all health centers in Buleleng Regency are ready to serve the 3rd dose of vaccine. Actually, this was yesterday that this happened, so this happened on Thursday. I'm videoing this part on Friday. So the 3rd dose or booster vaccine will be served in all health centers in Buleleng. So there is a total of 20 health centers spread around Buleleng. that will be able to serve people who meet the requirements to receive the booster vaccine, according to the Coordinator for Data and Information of Buleleng COVID-19 Task Force, and Pakatut, who's also the head of Communications and Information Technology of Buleleng Regency, explained that the booster vaccine can be carried out for people 18 years and over with an interval of 6 months or more since the second shot. And he said people just have to show up at the local puskesmas with a photocopy of their ID card and their second vaccine certificate. The certificate can be shown through the PL or it can be printed out. And he said, remember, it's been 6 months since dose 2. And more on Bali. So a few videos ago, I was talking about Ogoh-Ogoh and how the governor had issued an order saying that Ogoh-Ogoh could go on, the creation of Ogoh-Ogoh and the Ogoh-Ogoh parades. However, Koster allows Ogoh-Ogoh, but traditional villages in Klungkung refuse. So a number of banjars, or traditional villages, have reversed course. And according to the chiefs of traditional villages throughout Klungkung, they are refusing to make Ogoh-Ogoh parades. I'm sure that's going to disappoint some people. The village heads in Klungkung, namely Klungkung, Banjarakan, and Dawan sub-districts, agreed not to organize and hold the Ogoh-Ogoh parade in connection with Nyepi. One of the considerations is the prediction of an Omicron surge in February. A meeting was held with the heads of 3 of the 4 sub-districts. One sub-district was missing, and the results were that they agreed not to hold the Ogoh-Ogoh parades. And why? Well, as I mentioned, there's Omicron. And why? Well, as I mentioned, Omicron and the economy of people who are still affected by the pandemic, and considering that the making and parade of Ogoh-Ogoh have no connection with the rituals Nyepi or the day before Nyepi. According to E. Dewa Made Tirtha, he said, to avoid that, it's better if we prioritize the Yadnya ritual rather than the Ogoh-Ogoh procession, so the Ogoh-Ogoh parade will not be held. And a meeting with the Bendesa in Nusa Dua will be held in the near future. That is the 4th sub-district that was not at the meeting. After the meeting with Nusa Dua, and if they agree, a circular letter will be made to all Bendesa throughout Klungkung Regency. And as I said, there's going to be some people disappointed, and he realized that, and he said, yeah, it's natural that there are going to be disappointments. There are pros and cons to everything. However, it's important to remember that the collective safety is far more important. He said, anyone object? Of course, the name is a lot of people, but we prioritize what is good for our safety together. And so if you're in Klungkung, no Ogoh-Ogoh parade. Now, I don't know how this is going to affect the rest of the island. We'll see as we get closer to Nyepi, and if the numbers continue to go up around the island, will Ogoh-Ogoh be passed over once again this year? Quite possible, but I hope not. I was really looking forward to it. My granddaughter was really looking forward to it. And more on Bali. There's a lot of Bali news this week. As I said, Accelerate National Strategic Projects PLN audience to the governors. So the general manager of PLN met with the governor of Bali to discuss projects for electricity, to make sure we have enough electricity. And well, we have not had big problems over the last couple of years with electricity, but we've also had no tourists here. In the past, yeah, we have. And a long time ago when I came here in 1989, it was frequent not to have electricity. And well, I kind of liked it. And I still have candles around my room stored somewhere here in case of electrical outage. And so what is its plan? PLN conveyed the PSN development plan, the Java Bali connection 500 kilovolts, and the positive impact it's going to have on the Balinese people. The head of PLN said it was important to have the meeting with the governor in order to synergize efforts between PLN and the local governments to improve the reliability of the electrical system in Bali, and that this will have a positive impact on the lives of people that live here. And I agree, it will. And the governor expressed his appreciation to PLN for strengthening the reliability of electricity on the island. And Governor Koster also stated he would support development that can improve the living standards of Balinese people. Okay, time for update wrap-up, and a bunch of updates today. Last time there was none, today there's a bunch. So the Ministry of Health reported first 2 Omicron-related deaths in Indonesia. One was a local transmission, the other was a person returning from overseas trip Both had underlying conditions. And the Ministry of Health recorded 1,161 Omicron cases yesterday, an increase of 83 from the previous day. So numbers are going up, and we can expect them to go up some more. The good news is that everything seems to be mild so far, with the exception of the 2 deaths, and they had underlying conditions. So if we can think about anything positive about this is the positive thing is, as infectious as this is, it seems to be pretty mild. And Bali, still no reported cases in Bali. Isn't that strange? In one of the segments, I was talking about Thailand getting ready to go back to the no quarantine. Now, there's a story I'll talk about more on Wednesday in detail. Phase out of travel quarantine urged in the Philippines. So they're looking at, once they get through the surge of Omicron cases, they're looking at going back to no quarantine there, because they said we want tourists, and we're looking at Thailand and we're seeing what they're doing, and why can't we do it? And so they're going to be considering that. I'll talk about that on Wednesday. And an interesting piece, which I will talk about much more in depth, from the finance minister, who says Bali needs to diversify its economy and stop relying on tourism. Okay, and this has been said, as I've said many times before, this has been said over and over again before the Bali bombing, the first Bali bombing, but really, especially afterwards when Bali was empty. And, well, it's been said here, and is it happening? Not so much. Some places it's happening, but not enough. And so I'll talk about that story. That's an important one. If you have kids or grandkids here, you want to see the economy become more diversified to give them more options on working and living here. And some bad news in Buleleng. I guess it was 2 videos ago, I was talking about a mother and daughter who were swept away during the floods in the river and into the ocean. The daughter's body was found. The mother's has not been found. There were guys out here 2 days ago, in some of the worst seas, huge waves, and they were out in Zodiacs. There were 2 Zodiacs right out in front of the house here, doing a search full of guys. And the government has officially stopped the search for the body and offered their prayers for the family. And that's all the updates. And so what about the wrap up? Okay, well, so Bali lost a couple of events. Okay, and every government official is saying, chill, it's not a big thing. There's 345 events or something, I forget the exact number, and these are just 2 of them, and it's related to COVID. Don't worry about it. Don't get upset. Don't become oversensitive. We have plenty, and the president has apparently reassured the governor that Bali is still the center for G20. Disappointment from people who were expecting to get rolling and who are worried that more of this may happen. Will we see more of these cases of cancellations here because of Omicron? I hope not. And the MotoGP, wow, there's a lot going on there. And G20 and the MotoGP both involved with the quarantine, right? And so the quarantine continues to be a problem. It's keeping tourists from coming here. It's keeping a lot of things going. But the government right now is sticking with the 7-day and not backing off. Whether I like it, whether you like it, it's government policy. And so we just have to deal with it the way it is. Will it be changed in the future? Probably. Things change here all the time. Let's hope that it changes for the better, and soon. I mentioned this a little while ago about domestic tourists not enough and the weather being great and me wanting to take a road trip. And so I'm thinking about it. Probably not going to do it this month, but maybe next month when I'm more sure that the weather is not going to just suddenly turn crazy, rainstorms, high winds, and with me stuck out there riding around on my bike. I'm thinking about going to Ubud to see some old friends there, and maybe to Sanur. I have not stayed overnight in Sanur in 10 years, I guess. It's a new year. I'm trying some new things. And so if you know a good homestay in Sanur or in Ubud, you have a favorite homestay, leave a comment below, because I want to try some new places. I've been staying at the same homestay in Sanur, the same homestay in Ubud for decades, and I want to try something new. The only requirement is that there is parking off street for my motorcycle because, well, I love my motorcycle and I don't want anything to happen to it. So if you have a favorite place that you like to stay in Ubud or Sanur, leave a comment below, please. And a cooking video on lumpia is up. I just put it up a little while ago, and so if you want to take a look at that, a very simple way to make lumpia. And we just did one on black rice pudding, which will be up next Sunday. If you found this useful, informative, helpful, amusing, please give it a thumbs up. And if you have not subscribed, please consider subscribing. Stay safe, be kind to someone today. Thanks for viewing, and I will see you on Wednesday.